Okay, our next speaker is Dr. Ofer Maurer, who's a clinical psychologist, and he's the founder and director of the New School of Psychotherapy. He's a co-director of the Israeli Institute for Schema Therapy. He teaches psychology and psychotherapy at the Center for Academic Studies, supervises individuals in relationally inclined integrative therapy, and sees clients in private practice in Tel Aviv.
Before beginning my discussion, I'd like to thank you, Professor Aaron, for your fascinating talk and for allowing us to enter your world, your thoughts, your feelings. I think I can say this on behalf of everyone present that it's truly a great privilege and a delight, so thank you. I'd like to share something personal with you today, a little story about a family trip I went on when I was about 6 years old, together with my parents, my brother, and another couple of family friends, along with their kids and everything. All of us went hiking together in the beautiful mountain area in the vicinity of Jerusalem. It was a lovely day. We walked around for hours, truly having a great time. After gathering enough appetite, the grown-ups decided it was time for lunch, and so we marched, already quite famished, into a local grill house and sat down at the table. After some time, beautiful dishes started pouring out of the kitchen window. You know the drill: hummus, fries, and many, many salads. You wouldn't believe how hungry I was. I reached for some pita bread, tore some with my tiny hands, and stretched myself as far as I could, trying to reach that ever so inconveniently located hummus bowl that was calling me from afar. Just as I'm making it to the hummus, suddenly I hear a couple of the grown-ups alarmingly exclaiming, "Ofer, what are you doing? This is Mordechai's hummus." Silence. Uh-oh. Now let me tell you something. If we ever sit together in a restaurant situation today, I will probably be double-checking if we are sharing that dish or not. But what went on in that grill house that day? That little hungry boy that I was stepped into what he perceived to be a communal safe space where everything is everybody's. He did not realize there was potential danger involved, only to shamefully discover that the hummus belonged to Mordechai and that it's not meant for him. So I guess one of my points today is that sometimes we enter spaces that we think are safe only to realize we're trespassing, out of place, misunderstood, or simply wrong, exposing our vulnerability, exposing our tender human nature. Almost 15 years later, coming out of the closet as a gay man was much more premeditated. It's not totally different though. Just like hunger, that psychophysiological presence at the pit of your stomach that tells you to march to the fridge yet again, being gay, lesbian, bisexual, questioning regarding one's sexuality, or transgendered is really something you feel in your bones. Should I tell them who I am? I ask myself as a 20-year-old young man. Should I risk everything I know my life is, everything I have? Could my relationships with the most important people in my life sustain the blow? Or would I hear the grown-ups again say stuff like, "Ofer, what are you doing?" I'm pretty sure that sad hummus scene was lurking somewhere in my unconscious as I was pondering whether or not to take the risk and enter that space of potential vulnerability. Now add 15 more years to the count, and I had to come out yet again, but this time from the psychoanalytic closet I found myself in. See, I was raised professionally in a pretty psychoanalytic milieu, mostly object relations oriented, and later in a surrounding more relationally inclined. Still, all of this did not really prepare me for the strange realization regarding psychotherapy I was about to be facing. In the year 2003, I was invited to fill the large shoes of my good friend Sharon Ziv Beyman as head of the master's program in integrative psychotherapy at the British University of Derby in Israel. When she asked me to take the position, I told her, "Sharon, I think I can teach psychodynamic theory really well and do a reasonable job teaching CBT, but what on earth do I know about integration, Bobcas?" She was so incredibly supportive, as she always is, and so despite intense trepidation, I decided to take the plunge and view it as a learning opportunity. Boy, was I in for a wild ride. It was truly mind-blowing. I started reading integrative theorists whose names I've never heard, looking at research data I never came across, watching tapes of master clinicians from abroad, all of whom are working integratively and demonstrate fantastic results. Most importantly, I started having long discussions with fellow colleagues from UK, colleagues who served as mentors to the novice integrative therapist that I was. Now, as you know, rumors spread fast in Israel. And so I started getting these peculiar reactions from a few of my dynamic colleagues who said things like, "I heard you defected." Or something like, "So doing CBT is the thing today, huh? Good for you, good for you." What have I done again, I thought to myself. But you know, I actually never did have to give up my old professional self or sensibilities. I never did. But I'll get back to that in a few minutes. We can start the slides. What is the main problem that Aaron puts in front of us today? Aaron suggested that one of today's most pressing problems in the field of mental health is that long-lived split between psychoanalysis and psychotherapy, a split in which psychoanalysis seems to be viewing itself as superior to psychotherapy. He argues that psychoanalysis repeatedly arose out of traumatic circumstances, that it suffers from a tendency towards splitting, defensive operation, in which all vulnerability is dissociated and projected onto therapists who don't practice psychoanalysis proper. Okay. When vulnerability is denied as a result of trauma, Aaron rightfully warns us, we need to watch out for splitting and sadomasochistic enactments. After describing the nature of the problem, Aaron goes on to describe the circumstances that gave rise to this binary, concentrating on the Jewishness femininity that had to be repudiated. Aaron does not stop at that, but lays down a path, a trail of rich ideas leading to the solution of what is today best known as the third. It is not a protocol nor a strategy. No paved road and no easy way out awaits the one who tries to embrace it. Still, only a striving towards some form of thirdness, tells us Aaron, could free us from the various clinical and cultural impasses in which psychoanalysis has been trapped. Thirdness, Aaron spells out, means moving beyond binary opposition, inevitable hierarchy that accompanies splitting, thus opening up the space to think and feel. But here's the thing. Aaron points to the psychoanalysis-psychotherapy binary and addresses it at least as one of the most pertinent problems in the field of mental health. But I wonder, how much does this binary really impact our field today? While certainly a problem, is the actual price of this dissociative state of affairs really that high? What is this binary's real-world impact on our work? All these are questions we could certainly look into later in our discussion groups. But according to the way I read the mental health map today, one of the most problematic binaries in our field is a different one. And that is the binary comprising of psychoanalysis and all the other psychodynamically oriented therapies on one pole, and cognitive behavioral therapies, or CBT, on the other. Now let's hop on a plane and go to London. The 44th Maudsley debate that was held at University College of London last year was the best attended of any Maudsley debate in a 12-year history. These debates are held at the Institute of Psychiatry at King's College, Europe's largest center for research and postgraduate education in psychiatry and psychology. The debates are attended by hundreds of mental health professionals, and topics generally focus on issues that have a direct impact on mental health services. In each debate, a motion is put forth for the House to consider and vote on. On 2012, the motion that was put forth was, psychoanalysis has a valuable place in modern mental health services. Two panel speakers were in favor of the motion, while two others were against. Professor Peter Fonagy, in favor of the motion, noted that psychodynamic therapies fared no worse than CBT. Opposing the motion, Professor Paul Salkowskis likened psychoanalytic schools to cults, criticized the absence of symptom-based approach and some of the theories underpinning psychoanalysis. Professor Alessandra Lema, in favor, argued that psychoanalysis provides an unrivaled framework for understanding interactional processes. And finally, Professor Louis Wolpert shared his personal negative experience with psychoanalysis when suffering from severe depression and described it as pseudoscience with no evidence to back it up. Did you all get that? Cults, unrivaled framework, pseudoscience? This sounds like a bloody binary to me. And this went on in good old Britain. Just imagine. What's going on here? Let me reiterate. I believe that one of today's most pressing problems in the mental health field is the psychodynamic CBT binary, with both sides going for the jugular, not taking any hostages. If to borrow Aaron's vivid metaphor, both psychoanalytically informed and CBT-informed psychotherapists are caught in a nasty dance of complementarity, a dance which often takes the form of a clash, a tug of war, a push me, pull you, do or done to, or sadomasochistic enactment. Actually, at the core of this binary exists yet another binary, one that seems to be a sort of bedrock, laying underneath the binary previously mentioned. This bedrock binary is the one consisting of the constructivist hermeneutic position on the one pole and the positivistic empirical position on the other. But tackling this one requires elaboration that is beyond the scope of this brief message today. So after a little visit to London, let's take another trip, but this time a time tunnel trip back to times when we were studying for our BAs. I'd like to remind us all of two important concepts described by the famous developmental psychologist Piaget. Assimilation and accommodation are the two complementary processes of adaptation, processes through which awareness of the outside world is internalized. Although one may predominate at any one moment, they are actually inseparable and exist in dialectical relationship. In assimilation, according to Piaget, what we perceive in the outside world is incorporated into the internal world without changing the structure of that internal world, but potentially at the cost of shoving square pegs into round holes, hence pigeonholing and stereotyping external perceptions to fit our pre-existing notions. In accommodation, on the other hand, our pre-existing notions have to accommodate themselves to the evidence with which they are confronted and thus adapt to it, which can be a more difficult and painful process. When accommodating, we strive hard to reformulate our theories as we stumble upon some new phenomenon in our practice. If done well, our newly created theories fit better with what's really going on in our patients and in the real world that's out there. And I'm bringing these concepts into the discussion because I believe that the binaries we came across today are inherently linked to a misfortunate collapse in the ability to maintain that necessary dialectic tension between assimilative and accommodative processes. Usually, this collapse means that we are leaning back much too much on assimilative processes to guide our way through the clinical seas. And I'm pretty sure you all know what this sounds like. CBT therapists who claim that the main curative factor in psychoanalysis is nothing but exposure therapy in disguise do just that, overly leaning on assimilation when confronted with a strange-looking piece of analytic work. This saddens me. I mean, it may indeed be the case that exposure is a curative factor in psychoanalysis, but is that really the only thing that's going on? In my mind, this claim is much too assimilative. On the other hand, we have analysts who dismiss CBT or integrative therapies by saying stuff like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel over and over again. I mean, really, Freud already said it all before. They too are being much too assimilative, in my mind, leaving no way to acknowledge some truly amazing advancements in the field. And as someone who comes from the analytic world, this saddens me even more. Too much assimilation going on, too little accommodation. I'd like to return to Lou Aron's main message to us today, that the discipline of psychoanalysis and the psychoanalytic practitioner, in touch with vulnerability, not needing to split off and project it onto others, is capable of mutual recognition, empathy, and moral responsibility. Yet striving for thirdness or integration is no easy task on either side of the split. Unfortunately, it seems that in the divided field we cohabit, most dynamic therapists don't go to CBT conferences, and most CBT therapists don't attend analytically oriented conferences either. These don't read those others' journals, and those others do just the same. But you know what's strange? Research from the past 20 years strongly indicates that although on their professional identity level, most therapists declare themselves to be identified with a specific school of therapy, in their actual practice, most of them combine various ideas, strategies, techniques, and interventions from a variety of therapeutic approaches. At the same time, research also shows that most therapists harbor feelings of shame and guilt with regard to the incompatibility between their identity and their actual behavior. Yes, still today, so many psychotherapists are working in the closet. I believe the problem does not lie in the practice of integration itself, though. This practice is evidently much more common than most would admit, a practice that stems from the profound realization shared by most therapists that our clients have different and changing needs. They need us to be able to bring forth different ways of listening, different ways of being present, different ways of following, and different ways of leading at different points along that winding road. The problem regarding integration then is different. I believe that most of us just, never got trained in thinking and conceptualizing clinical material integratively. Most of us don't know the brilliant researchers in the field, and most of us don't dare to talk about our integrative practices or quandaries with our purist supervisors. Do you imagine that a young therapist in candidacy to become a psychoanalyst would even consider speaking to her supervisor about the possibility of assigning behavioral homework to her patient, even when she really feels it's high time for some good old real-world exposure work? I mean, really. My guess is that she probably wouldn't. I know that I didn't talk about it for so long. So it seems to me that most of us just never got the chance to think outside of the box, together with our mentors, a chance to collaboratively imagine various forms of accommodation, to negotiate various modes of integrative thirdness. And this is exactly why, about 3 years ago, a group of integrative researchers and psychotherapists, including myself, we set out to found the new school of psychotherapy. We set out to create a safe zone, a mutual space of vulnerability, if you wish, a place where different schools of therapy might safely communicate, learn from each other's clinical wisdom, and thus enrich one another's world. The present conference we're all attending today is an extremely important milestone on our trail, as both group analysts, relational therapists and analysts, and integrative therapists all are occupying the same space of vulnerability, bravely reaching out with our tiny hands, despite our traumatic pasts, for that gorgeous bowl of hummus in the distance. I'm pretty sure that all of you who came to this conference today are not that afraid of accommodating with your internal structures, of changing the way you view things in face of new information. Otherwise, you wouldn't have come to this kind of a conference in the first place. And this really feels good, being amongst people like you. I want to personally thank all of you for joining us today in this celebration of what I'm confident will prove to be thirdness at its best. And finally, I wish to extend special thanks to Professor Lou Aron, whose bright ideas have truly illuminated our way thus far and will undoubtedly continue to do so in the future. So thank you all so much.